Ryan Leckie. My name is Chris Olbedik. I'm a lawyer, and it's going to be a little like the Spanish Inquisition. I'm going to ask some tough questions to Ryan about the legal and possibilities of Haven Co. and Sealand. And after that, you're very welcome to ask some questions yourselves. Okay, first of all, Ryan, you're from the United States, right?
Yes, I originally am from the U.S.
So do you have a U.S. passport?
I do.
You have a U.S. passport.
I do have a U.S. passport.
So why don't you have a Sealand passport?
Because I haven't. I have both of them available to me. I haven't actually physically gotten my Sealand passport because I have been too lazy to get the photos taken for it.
So how does that work with Sealand? How do you become a Sealand citizen?
Sealand has maybe 200 or 300 citizens who have done major things for the government of Sealand over time. People like people who created the flag for Sealand and other things like that, as well as people involved in hosting content on Sealand, which is Sealand's major business right now.
So if you create a flag, you become a citizen. That's basically it.
I think that was the case in the past, but it was, we haven't really had anyone. I think there have been like 5 new people that are citizens in the past 20 years or so. So mostly it was early on, back in the 60s when Sealand was first declared as a country.
Yeah, maybe you can explain a bit more to the audience what Sealand actually is.
Okay. The history of Sealand is that during World War II, the British built a very reasonably sized anti-aircraft platform in the North Sea to protect their shipping and convoys as they were being formed at the Thames estuary. It's maybe 8 nautical miles off the coast of Harwich, which is a pretty big city in the UK, and one of their major ports, also Felixstowe. And they made the mistake at the end of World War II of abandoning it in international waters. And a bunch of people, led by Major Roy Bates, who was a British decorated soldier, got together and saw that it was abandoned territory that no one had claimed, and decided they would occupy it, and were thinking about doing pirate radio on it originally, and decided not to do that because there were other options that were better suited for that. But they had this, and they were in control of it, and they looked into the legal background and saw that they could actually declare it as their own country because there was nobody else living there. They were the entire population, and they had the right to self-govern. So they did, and they didn't really think too much of it until there were a couple of court cases which have supported that, and a lot of international support for it.
So basically the idea is that, or was actually, that it was outside the territorial waters of the UK, and this major came along, asked somebody to make him a flag, and made it into his own country, right?
I think that's substantially true, yes.
And now he's the self-proclaimed Prince of Sealand.
Correct.
And his wife is?
Princess of Sealand. Princess Joan of Sealand. And his son, Prince Michael, is Prince Michael of Sealand. Okay.
So it's a monarchy, actually.
It's a constitutional monarchy, yes.
And there are about 200 citizens at this very moment.
Approximately, yeah.
And what was his business with the fake passports? There's been some fake passports affair in Spain.
Yeah, that was a very interesting situation. There's another story that you would need to hear before that really makes any sense. Sealand has always had sort of an interesting legal history and military history. British tried to wrest control of it by tricking people into leaving. They were too smart for that. They also had plans drawn up to how to destroy it, and then I think it was Harold Wilson, the then minister or prime minister of their government, saw that this plan would likely result in loss of life to both sides, and decided it wasn't really worth it, and it was not the kind of thing the British government would do. So they decided not to do it. But they looked at various options for how to do this. There were some other people that weren't affiliated with the British government who decided they wanted to buy Sealand. This was, I think, in the 70s or maybe the early 80s. And they were German, and
there was a Dutch guy involved, wasn't there?
There were a bunch of Dutch hired contract mercenary / mafia types that were involved. So a very local, yeah. I think they were from Amsterdam, though, not from here. And they got together a small armed force and went over to Sealand. They started some fake negotiations with Prince Michael, or with Prince Roy, the Prince of Sealand.
That's Michael's dad.
Michael's dad, yeah.
Right.
Who's now 80 years old, so the day-to-day operation is done by Prince Michael. And they somehow managed to convince Michael to allow them entrance onto the top deck of the platform. It's a concrete structure. I don't know, there are various pictures, but it's really, really hard to get on there if you don't have the support of the people that are already on there, because it's like 60 feet with sheer nothingness, and they can shoot you. So they managed to get on board, and then they rapidly took over and locked Michael in a room on Sealand in like a prison for 3 days.
This was like a military coup.
It was, in fact, more an invasion. It wasn't. They weren't members of the existing
Right.
military, but it was
Yeah.
a complete invasion.
War
and
in
it was a war.
Sealand.
It was a war. It's the most exciting part of Sealand's military history.
So this was in the beginning of the 70s, or?
I think it was in the mid-70s. I'm not
Right.
sure. We have the exact date, but I don't remember this. Basically, they let Michael ashore in Holland without a passport.
How
but
old was Michael at the time?
Michael was, I think, in his early 20s, mid-20s perhaps. And he was left on shore here. He called up his father, who happens to be a retired major in the British Army and thus has lots of British Army friends. They got a helicopter. They took the doors off the helicopter. They got a bunch of reasonably heavily armed ex-soldiers from the British military, who then were, I guess, they were at that point the Sealand military, and I'm sure they got citizenship for this. And they flew the helicopter above Sealand and dropped down on a rope and took the place back over, because the people that had taken it over were drunk, and thus it was pretty easy. And nobody was killed, nobody was hurt. There was only one shot fired, and that was by Michael. And
well, they took one prisoner of war, didn't they?
yeah, nobody was hurt, but they took everyone prisoner of war. They released the Dutch people because they were simply contract soldiers at the end of the war. There was no reason to hold them. But the guy who was a ringleader of it actually had a passport from Sealand, so they considered him to be a traitor, and they held him in jail for treason. Yes. It was actually a long period of time. It was something like 5 weeks or something like that. And the German government then sent an envoy of some sort to the British government trying to get their citizen released. And the British government disavowed any responsibility whatsoever for this, saying that Sealand is sovereign and we're not involved in their dealings in any way. You should go talk to them, or we have no control over them. You should go talk to them. And the German government then had the envoy go directly to Sealand and negotiate for this guy's release. And he was released. So, because it would be a real pain to keep a prisoner.
How did that work with the treason thing? I mean, he was arrested for treason, taken a prisoner of war, but was there an act for that? Was there some penal code saying that you can't be a traitor on Sealand, or?
Well, in a principality, generally the decisions of the prince are law.
So whatever Prince Roy says rules.
Indeed, except to the extent that it's a constitutional principality, and thus he's prohibited from infringing on various rights.
But there is a constitution.
There is a constitution. It's very, very simple, but it basically reserves almost all rights to individuals.
All rights to individuals and Prince Roy.
All government is done by Prince Roy, but most things are not covered by government.
But isn't it basically a dictatorship then?
What you mean, in that it's not elected?
Well, not that it's not elected, but that basically Prince Roy is the guy in charge. And whatever he says goes.
It's no different than any other country where whoever is in charge is the one who makes the rules.
Okay.
The constitutional part restricts what the government can actually do, but within what it can do, there is only one lawmaker rather than a bunch. It's really just a population size difference.
Yeah, and
50% of our population is like or some large fraction of our population is in the government.
So coming back to the fake passports, where this all started from, what was that about?
The German people, when they got back to Germany, were annoyed. So they and various other people started doing things where they were selling fake passports. They claimed that they were Sealand government passports, and they printed so many of them. Like, I think it was something like 160,000 of these that they got used for really bad things. They got used to open bank accounts for various purposes in various countries. We have scanned photos of them being used for diplomatic visas in a bunch of countries, which I guess is not that bad actually. And the guy who killed Versace actually hid out on a houseboat, registered as a diplomatic vehicle of some Principality of Sealand
Yeah,
registered diplomat.
he was
Yeah.
supposed to be the Minister of State or something, right? Of
No,
Sealand.
that was a different.
That was a different guy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the guy who
well,
issued it. But yeah,
yeah. So there are all these fake passports running about.
indeed, there are many fake passports.
Yeah.
There are more fake passports by a factor of like 100 than the real ones.
Okay. We've been talking about Sealand as if it is a country. Is it actually a country itself?
It meets all the technical requirements to be a country, and for the last 30 years, everyone around it has treated it as a country. It has maintained its own territorial integrity. No one at all has landed there without permission of the people that live there. And there have been shots fired at Royal Navy vessels that tried to get too close, and they immediately fled very, very quickly, and nothing happened. There are various rulings where people living on Sealand don't have to pay UK taxes because they're not in the UK.
So how many people are living there then?
It varies. During World War II, it had 200 to 300 people.
No, but
now we
currently,
have less than 20.
less than 20 are not paying taxes.
Less than 20 are not paying British taxes, correct. Yes.
Okay, so that's a bad thing. But the UK doesn't really recognize Sealand, does it?
It does in a lot of its actions. It certainly has
Yeah, but
never,
the
it certainly
Ministry of
never
State
had a
once said-
single action.
Didn't the Home Secretary once make a statement in which he said, we do not recognize Sealand as an independent country?
I believe in the last year and a couple of months they did make that. Previous to that, the Home Office, which is the British internal type thing, would defer all comment to the Foreign Office, which would then defer all comment to the Home Office.
Yeah.
So it was pretty recursive.
Yeah, I have it here.
But there are plenty of countries that don't recognize other countries. Certainly mainland China does not recognize Taiwan, but most people would argue that Taiwan has many of the characteristics of statehood and is actually pretty much a state. And we don't necessarily imply that we're as much a state as, say, the Netherlands, but in terms of recognition. But in terms of the actual technical requirements of being a state, we seem to meet all of them. We have a population which is defined and accounted for. We have international commerce of various kinds.
Right.
We have well-defined
And you have
territory.
some legal advices on the website stating that Sealand is actually a jurisdiction in itself, don't you?
We do, yes.
Yeah. One of them was written by a Dutch law professor, actually.
I believe, yeah, that's on some site. Which site was that? Was that the?
Yeah,
report on Sealand?
there's a fake site and there's a correct site.
Right. The fake site we don't have any responsibility for. The fake site may have some correct information, but it's not our responsibility because it is, after all, a fake site.
No, but this was on the correct site by a guy named
Okay.
Bela Vitani.
Okay.
I run down his record. He doesn't exist.
I don't have any information on this.
Okay.
Okay.
He was supposed to be a law professor at the University of Nijmegen, and they don't know the guy there.
I believe it may be quite old, but
Okay.
I think it's like 30 years old if it is a thing. We've had certainly in the last year plenty of Professor Gary Slapper from the Open University. We've had various other people that have
Saying
done
that you were okay, you were in the
Say,
clear.
well, they said it was a really good question and that all the evidence points to yes. He didn't say
Okay.
definitively, yes, I will 100% guarantee that it's a country, but he said that it's a very, very strong case.
Okay, let's put the country issue aside. Let's talk about Havencall for a while now.
Okay?
What is actually your connection to Sealand? I mean, what do you have a contract with the Crazy Major, or
We have a contract with the government of Sealand in the person of Prince Roy. We also have an equity relationship with the government of Sealand, which is a pretty common thing to do when you're doing business in places like that. And we have operational, certainly, contracts with them for various things.
but you didn't take over Sealand?
You can't really have a country owned by a company. Well, I guess you can in some countries, but not in Sealand.
Not on Sealand. So what are you actually a company? What is your legal entity?
Yeah, we're a company. We're, I think, one of the few companies registered on Sealand at the moment.
So you're a limited liability company according to the laws of Sealand.
Correct.
You don't have you don't have any legal entity abroad.
We do have some legal entities abroad for our operations abroad. Being a global co-location company with network resources elsewhere, we have some parts of our operation offshore.
Offshore.
In
Is
different
that-
places offshore, rather, yeah.
Okay, so that's on one of the Caribbean islands.
That's Anguilla is actually where we have one company, yes.
Okay. So how are things going at Haven Co now?
We have enough customers that we break even and generate a small profit, which is a bit better than a lot of companies right now. And we have had no serious problems of any sort. We expected right after we did this that we'd have a lot of problems in the first month or two, and that after that it wouldn't be a big deal. We had no serious challenges and no serious problems, so we think the UK's government policy is just to sort of ignore it and hope it goes away. And every day they wait, it gets worse and worse for them in terms of stronger and stronger case for us.
Right. And you've been about for 2 years now? Haven
Pretty
Co.
much, yeah.
About 2 years.
18 months, 2 years, yeah.
And you make a small profit, you said?
Yes.
And you talked about your clients. Who are your clients?
We have a lot of online gaming establishments that would otherwise be in the Caribbean. We have payment systems of various kinds, both for the gaming industry and for general hosting. We have people that put their email servers with us, and other intranet servers, accounting servers, and everything else. And we have a couple of people that are resellers of our service to other people.
And gambling, that's basically the background of the Hastings family, right?
Yes. As well as internet technology, yeah.
So is that also the idea about
Well,
Haven Co?
it got started more because when we lived in Anguilla, we really wanted to do something like this, and we wanted to host our own information in Anguilla, but the government of Anguilla wasn't very cooperative. I personally wanted to host an internet payment system there, online stock trading and everything else. And gaming has always had places where you can go, it's just they're not as profitable or as good. You can certainly put a casino in Costa Rica, a lot of people do it, and pay a lot of money to host your server there. We just do that cheaper. There are some things that we can do that you can't do anywhere else. Online stock trading on a true online market, you couldn't do anywhere else, and you could do on Sealand. It's just waiting for software.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about some of the legal aspects of Sealand Haven Co for a while. The international law aspects. You're probably aware of the arrest by the FBI about 2 weeks ago of a Russian
Yeah, I
citizen.
was about 100 feet away.
That was about you were at the same conference.
Yeah.
Could you tell the audience about that?
It was pretty scary, actually. It was the morning after everyone had given talks while I was pretty, and it was just sort of out of the blue. You didn't expect this to happen because he'd already given the talk. It was a pretty good talk and pretty controversial talk, but it's nothing that other people hadn't done, and nothing that isn't discussed every day on mailing lists and for the last 5 years. It's just that this was a case where somebody was in the wrong place at the wrong time and was a convenient target, I think.
You're aware, Ryan, that there's Dutch police running about here also,
Yes, I am.
and you're not afraid to be arrested.
The Dutch government is so incredibly much more reasonable than the US government that I have absolutely no fear of anything being done because we're not breaking Dutch law for one, but the Dutch government is vastly more reasonable than the US government for almost anything.
Well, that's one of the issues. You claim you're not breaking Dutch law at the moment, but the Russian guy was breaking American law in Russia.
Correct, but we, even on Sealand, do not break Dutch law, as far as I'm aware.
Sorry?
On Sealand, we do not break Dutch law, as far as I'm aware. We're not doing anything there's no, like...
Well, we have some very strict gambling laws here in the Netherlands.
Haven Co. does not operate any sort of casinos whatsoever. We provide co-location services to various companies that wish to co-locate various servers wherever they want.
But you could be held liable, couldn't you?
There's a common carrier argument that all we do is provide hosting, and we haven't been asked by any government anywhere in the world to do anything with respect to any of our servers, so certainly there's nothing that we've done that's criminal in any jurisdiction as a result.
Isn't that exactly the same argument Napster is running, for instance, in the US? We're not infringing
No
the
one in
rights of
Napster
others.
has been brought up
Other
on criminal
people are
charges.
copying the works. We're
No
just
one in- yeah.
facilitating. Go ahead.
There's a hugely different standard for criminal and civil liability.
That's correct, but I mean,
Um,
you're also operating, or there were some rumors that you were going to operate a Napster clone on Sealand also.
It turns out you can't actually make very much money off of hosting Napster clones because it's very bandwidth intensive. But yeah, but we would certainly, if somebody wanted to pay us to do this, we would certainly do it with no problems whatsoever.
Right. Let's talk about the Yahoo case. You're aware of the Yahoo case?
The Nazi paraphernalia.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting case where cross-jurisdictional stuff is first being tested.
Yeah, can you explain to the audience what the case is about?
Basically, Yahoo, which operates in probably like hundreds of countries worldwide, has a site in France. France, as a result of all the awful Nazi stuff that happened during World War II, makes it illegal to trade in Nazi paraphernalia of various kinds, outside of very, very strict restrictions.
Oh, the site was actually in the United States.
Yahoo France, which operates in France, there was legal action taken by the French government against, I believe it was directly against Yahoo France for the actions of Yahoo.com.
Yeah, because there was a Yahoo entity there.
Because there was a Yahoo website or whatever else that was, Yahoo in the US, Yahoo.com, was, people were using that to auction things. However, Haven Co. has no operations in France, so.
No, but basically what happened is that this French judge said he had jurisdiction over an American site, over the American Yahoo auction site, which was auctioning Nazi stuff.
But
and
they did this.
Since they were also auctioning it in France, he said you're violating French law, and for that reason I have jurisdiction over you. And now my verdict is that you have to shut down Yahoo America, the auction site, for all French citizens.
Right, or they were going to go after Yahoo France and prohibit it from operating in France. They would have a very hard time going to the US and getting actual actions taken in the US against a US company due to French law in France, if for no other reason than pure nationalism.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
If you were a French company,
right,
or a French government, the French government, trying to take action against a US company which is not breaking US law in the US, but is breaking French law while it's in the US, just nationalism alone would make it very difficult for the US to support that. So any actions against a US company would actually have to happen in US court.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to support that for the US government, but I mean, basically what they did is they used IP mapping to block the entire site. So couldn't that happen with Haven Co. Sealand?
Certainly you could block any of the IPs of any of our customers on your country's firewall. I wouldn't be surprised if the Great Firewall of China or something blocked our sites along with HAL2000.org and everything else. So it's certainly possible you can block IPs on the internet. However, any sort of free country is going to have a very hard time blocking all of the IPs it wants to block, or in fact any of the IPs it wants to block, because that's generally done on a network by network basis by network carriers. And if you look at the number of network connections that goes into just the US, it's something like 15,000 separate autonomous systems operate in the US. And determining routing policy is hard enough for the people who actually run those networks. It's probably harder for the government to force routing policy on them, just from a technical perspective.
Okay, well, I'm a lawyer, so I don't know anything about the technical stuff. Maybe the audience can ask some technical questions later. Basically, the Yahoo case is about freedom of speech, isn't it?
It's about freedom of, it's a slightly twisted version of freedom of speech. It's freedom of commerce, which in a lot of cases commerce is considered to be speech, but in a lot of cases it's not. There are certainly restrictions you can place on commerce, which if it didn't have the commercial aspect, wouldn't be restricted as well.
Yeah, but it's protected
Speech
by the First Amendment in the
United
US
States. Certainly
to,
trade in such
to
things
sell
would be,
Nazi things, and in France it was a crime to do so.
Correct.
So what are your thoughts about freedom of speech?
I think it's, I would much prefer to host a Nazi site and a site that debunks that Nazi site than to tell the Nazi site that they can't be hosted. Because I think ultimately if information is really awful information, but it's not true, having both sides is going to convince people of this much faster than saying don't host this evil Nazi stuff. That will just make it more attractive to some people and will make it impossible to really freely express all this and to have everyone understand all this stuff.
But don't you feel bad about the victims of Nazism?
That's why I feel that Nazi information should be distributed on the internet. It should be shown to be exactly what it is. That's the best thing for the victims, would be to show this stuff is pretty much garbage, and this is why it's garbage, rather than to try to keep it hidden away in like a box.
Yeah, but still, there are people who suffered from Nazism, especially in France, Germany, in Europe, that are very much hurt by merely seeing sites like that.
They're not being like taped to a bed and forced to watch web browser images of the Holocaust. The people who would be looking at it primarily would be people who were actively interested in learning about it. And if they don't want to view it, nobody's like forcing people to view it.
Yeah, but they're bothered by it, in a way.
They're bothered if they're bothered by the existence of information somewhere in the world. They perhaps have more in common with the Nazis than they would like to admit.
Well, one of the fundaments of French laws, similar to the law that forced Yahoo America to be shut down, is privacy.
Okay.
Can you relate to that?
Well, the main thing is the EU privacy regulations, which apply to most of the EU now. They basically say that if you're going to keep any records on any sort of transaction with a consumer, you have to allow them ways to.
Well, that's data protection privacy.
Data protection.
But
Okay.
on your site, you're very much in favor of privacy, and you define privacy as the right to be let alone, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So.
For our customers, we have.
In the opinion of the French legislator, I mean, maybe we don't agree with that, but in the opinion of the French legislator, Nazi sites like that are actually an infringement of the right to be let alone.
That is exactly why I'm not a lawyer. That kind of logic is so convoluted that it could only come from, I don't know. it's
crazy countries.
I think I'm not going to say that France is a crazy country. I just know that it on IRC gets banned an awful lot.
No, but there's what I'm trying to say here is that there's always a conflict, or very often there's a conflict between the freedom of speech and privacy laws.
There may be a conflict between arbitrary laws that are called privacy laws and freedom of speech. But I think freedom of speech is, there's a reason why there's an amendment in the US Constitution for freedom of speech. And religion and everything else. And there's not an amendment for privacy. Freedom of speech is ultimately much more important. If you have information that somebody else would like to hide, and you have it, you should be able to communicate this information.
So basically, you consider the freedom of speech to be more fundamental than privacy?
Correct. I believe freedom of speech is one of the most important rights possible, if not the most important.
So let's take another example. Take, for instance, that you're very much against abortion.
Okay.
And that you want to run a site on which you have all the names and addresses of doctors who abort.
Yeah.
And all the people that help them. And that you call upon people to kill these people or injure them or whatever. And whenever that happens, you delete their record.
Okay. That's pretty
feel about
similar
that?
to the assassination politics idea by Jim Bell, where he made it even worse. You had an anonymous electronic cash market where you put up a betting pool for people when they you bet on the method and time of a person's death, such that the person who actually does it has the best chance of winning. And that is a very very scary idea. I certainly find it very scary. I think the people who wish to create these systems don't realize that the obvious thing to do is to place them at the very top of the list. But it's certainly a problem. There's really that kind of thing.
Would you host a site like that on Sealand?
It wouldn't violate our acceptable use policy. As far as I know, nobody would ever try to host a site like that because it's pretty insane. But nobody has come to us with that. But it's not against our acceptable use policy.
No, but I mean, here I am. I want to come to Havenco. I have this terrific site. Will you host it?
We would probably prefer you not tell us what it does, but
Go away. Go to Antigua, right? Something like that.
Well, if you didn't tell us what it was and you hosted anything, you could actually get it hosted. But you could also just take a stolen credit card and go to the U.S. and host it.
So this is Bill Clinton, don't ask, don't tell.
Well, if we don't know, there's nothing we can do, really. So it's just a box. As far as I'm concerned, all of our customers are just boxes, unless I know more about them. So it's certainly possible such a site could be hosted on sealand for a long period of time.
Okay. As long as you don't know
isn't
about
against any existing laws and against our acceptable use policy. It's a horrible, awful thing, but yeah, it's not against our policies.
It should be there. Okay, let's talk about your accepted use policy. You just mentioned that. What is in your accepted use policy?
The Haven Co. AUP itself is that you can't spam, which is really an entirely practical decision on our part. We wouldn't be able to have network connectivity if you could spam. And you're not allowed to hack other people's machines from our machines, because that would use up all of my time trying to track down these complaints. And other than that, the main restriction is that you're not allowed, it's illegal in the country where your server is actually located, which is general because we wish to have multiple data centers. For sealand, only stuff illegal by sealand law is illegal, and currently that would be child pornography, full stop.
So that's the only thing that's illegal?
Like murder and everything else is illegal on sealand, but you can't really commit murder with a computer, so it doesn't apply. The only data that's illegal is child pornography.
So the only thing that's illegal is child pornography?
To host, yes.
So isn't child, I mean, we all agree child pornography is bad, and we all agree that a site like we just mentioned is bad also. But there's, on both occasions, there's a freedom of speech implication, isn't there?
The argument is that in the actual creation of child pornography, children are being harmed. Like, I don't think we haven't ever really had anybody who wants to host any sort of child pornography, so it hasn't been fully fleshed out. But like the simulated child pornography, which the US thinks is illegal also, I think they're smoking
if the US thinks
large
it's
amounts
illegal,
of crack.
it's illegal.
No, it's our policy would be, if you want to do simulated child pornography, you probably could, as long as it was like text files or something, sure. The reason child pornography is illegal on sealand is that children are actually harmed in the making of it, and that's like different than arbitrary other content.
But aren't the people who are supposed to be killed by these sites also harmed?
They would be harmed by the outcome of it, not by the actual production of it. I think like some person would be spending lots of time writing the site, but that would be the only really harm that would come from the actual writing of it until it was used. And the things that where it's used are actual crimes in the locations where it's being done. Like certainly killing somebody is a crime in almost any country, and it would be, if they actually did such things, that would be a crime there. So we would fully support the authorities trying to prosecute them with whatever information we had on our side, but we wouldn't have any information because we would only have customer information, which we wouldn't really have.
Right. So how do you define child pornography on Haven Co? You just mentioned some.
Well,
some
nobody's really.
Child shouldn't be harmed.
Yeah, well, like it has to be an actual, like real child pornography. It can't be circular definition.
So
it can't
what is
be,
the
like,
minimum
simulated.
age?
It hasn't really come up, but probably
But this
the
is your
US
main issue. This
Nobody
is
wants to
the
host
only issue
pornography
in your
on Earth.
accepted use policy.
Nobody wants to host any pornography at all with us because we charge them too much money. It's not a good place to host pornography. But we would probably make it like 18 or something.
18.
Sure.
Okay, so that's the bottom
That's
line.
not really my decision to make. It's the government of sealand, but sure, 18.
Okay. So we're reaching the last bit of the interview. We've been talking about how Haven Co and sealand can protect you from governments, onshore governments, as you mentioned them. How can people be actually protected against Haven Co itself?
Well, there's a few ways. There's some technical ways, which are my favorite. I believe write code, not laws, and also buy really secure tamper-resistant hardware, not like trust people. We have a couple of options. Some of our casino sites, we use a secure coprocessor, which is a metal card, inside which is a 46 and a random number generator and everything else. So really, we have no way whatsoever of entering this thing without destroying it. We can certainly destroy any of our customer servers. A lot of them have servers in other places too, and they keep backups off-site and everything else. So it would annoy them, and we have no incentive to do this. But some of our customers are completely secure from us for everything except for being disconnected. And other ones trust us. They know the people involved. They see us on the news. We're not like, we'd be putting an awful lot of effort into this to be some like secret government scam. So people have a certain willingness to trust us, and every day that increases. But if you really want to
disconnect them. You can disconnect them.
We can certainly disconnect any of our customers just by walking up and pulling the plug. Yeah.
So how do I know that Havenco is going to disconnect me?
You will.
Is that a matter of trust?
You have to keep paying us. If you stop paying us, we will disconnect you immediately. But we make more money off of our customers than it costs us to provide service to them. So we have no incentive to disconnect them. But we could certainly disconnect any of our customers at any time if we wanted to, and they would then. There would be a breach of contract with them, and they could do various things.
Yeah, you can change your policy, or
They can stop
the
stop paying us
prince. The
fundamentally.
prince can come back, take over the island again, or whatever.
They could just stop.
Decide to throw you out.
They certainly could do this. But it hasn't happened in the past year. The Sealand government is an active supporter of the project. They own a lot of the company, and their son, Prince Michael, is our pretty much our leader. So it's
He's
very
your what? He's your leader?
He's our like current leadership, yes. So it's pretty unlikely that we would have any actions taken by the Sealand government against us.
So you actually accept the prince as your leader then on the island?
As our company, it is pretty much led by Prince Michael, yes.
Okay, well, it's interesting.
It's I guess the royalty in lots of countries gets involved in private business, but in our case, we happen to have the head of, well, not the heir apparent involved in our company.
And if the island sinks or whatever, if it's destroyed, you can always start another island, can't you?
That's slightly legally tricky, but yeah, we could probably in the same territory put up the same structure again.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not. That is. So some of these questions really haven't been tested that well. Whether you can rebuild a structure over again is the Netherlands. They rebuild the Netherlands all the time with like filling in space, but there's a certain part of it which isn't. So that's tricky. But in all the land area statistics, they count all this reclaimed space. So the reclaimed space has a pretty good legal history. And being offshore, there's no minimum population. There are countries that have 50-some people in them. Pitcairn Island is a good example. And so it's lots of little things together. It makes it an interesting case.
So you don't fear for competitors then?
We don't really fear for competitors. If people want to set up data hosting in other countries, we would probably be willing to trade space with them or buy from them also. We think the only thing that we really fear is if people don't the thing we would fear is if people didn't actually want to do this kind of thing and host content offshore. But we have enough customers and we keep getting more customers, so there's clearly a market. And if other people want to do the same thing, they probably can't do it on Sealand. They could resell our services on Sealand. But if they wanted to set up another country, or ideally take a big country and make them change their laws to be really, really good and turn it into a really nice place to live with really good food and lots of nice warm beaches, I would fully support them in doing that.
So you're open for suggestions?
If anyone has a really good country and can influence their government greatly, yes, definitely.
Okay. Well, let's hear whether the audience has some nice ideas about that. Gentleman over there.
Level 3, and their routing sucks. But other than that, we haven't had any problems. We've had no problems with the people filtering us for anything like that. It's only been they're incompetent.
Okay, thank you.
Who's next? Over there.
You're going to take it over?
Yeah.
That actually plays directly to my question, which is, you have a potential weak link, which is your first hop or hops off of Sealand. How do you defend against those links being severed, and what countries do they go through?
Okay, we have, fundamentally we have, that is an issue. We have very easy access to the UK. It's line of sight, effectively, or it's cheap cable. We have more expensive access by cable to France, any of the countries in the North Sea, Norway, everywhere else. We have potentially satellite access anywhere from Singapore to South Africa to Denver, Colorado. We have multiple VSAT links to various locations. We have, certainly we have connectivity via the UK. That's the majority of our low latency bandwidth. When we have the ability to do fiber, we do not have fiber to any locations off of Sealand at present, and we don't have high-speed connectivity other than satellite, which is high bandwidth but low or very high latency also, to anywhere except any. We have no low latency bandwidth except to the UK.
So you currently have multiple heterogeneous ways of getting data off of sealand?
Yes. We have, it's pretty complicated, partially by accident and partially intentionally. We announce our autonomous system in various locations. We then GRE tunnel serious madness to various other locations, and then our data comes over various VSAT links. Partially because it's cheaper to buy consumer-priced VSAT links than GRE tunnel over them, and partially because it affords an additional level of indirection. And we can add a VSAT link in about 6 hours to a location, and if there's any problem, we can start adding a bunch of them. We have a space for like 30 VSAT antennas, and we don't think it'll be a problem. Certainly our service quality would degrade if there were serious actions taken, but it wouldn't put us out of business by any chance, and it wouldn't really hurt our customers that much. And it would cause us to advance the state of the art in caching technology, I think.
Next question, over here.
Yes, 2 questions. They're pretty short. One is, since you guys seem pretty well set up legally, or at least not sorely tested, are you aware of having suffered any extra legal attacks?
We have armed security on deck all the time. You mean extra legal attacks like military attacks? Or?
Oh, no, I mean like interfering with your bandwidth, that sort of thing.
The people who could DOS us would be the kind of people who would support us, so it's not really going to be a problem. Like, I don't think governments are really in that business. It would be people who support free speech that would be able to do that kind of attack, and they wouldn't go after the kind of place that would be supportive of free speech.
Okay. And the second is, can you sing your country's national anthem?
I will take I think we actually have one, but I've never heard it. So no, it's been played. It was played on Canadian radio, and it sounds like pretty boringly like any other national anthem. But yeah.
Okay, do you have a top-level domain or asked for one?
We don't have a top-level domain, nor have we asked for one. The process for that, you may be aware, is really, really complicated. It involves like 9 international organizations, members of some committee of the UN, lots of stuff, and
you have to be recognized as a country.
So you don't need to be recognized as a country. The Palestine state actually has this, and they stole PS, which is sort of annoying, because that would be the obvious one for Principality of Sealand. Not that I would say anything negative about Palestinians. The process would require more legal resources than we currently have just to do it properly. Even if we have a good chance of doing it, we don't have the resources to actually do it right now. But it's something we're always looking at and would like to do in the future. We think we deserve one, and we'd like to actually get it. But if waiting 5 years increases our chances by a decent fraction, we'll wait 5 years. Because we don't really need it. Everyone uses COM anyway.
In early press releases about Sealand, it said that you were planning to donate space to websites seeking political asylum. Are you still planning to do that? What sort of sites, and how do you request it?
We would probably do that for really legitimate political sites. We got like 500 to 1,000 responses for that, and it became pretty clear that if we were going to not be a standard.com and consume vast quantities of stuff, it actually costs us a lot of money to host any given one of our customers. Our margins are decent, but they're not so huge that we can afford to give away vast quantities of space. If there were a seriously important site, we would probably be willing to host it. A political site, Amnesty International or somebody like that has a really good international case, wants to host with us, we can probably find funding for it. But a lot of those organizations actually are able to get cash donations from elsewhere and then pay regular rates. And we then also got into the position of, if we support one side or something in that, we are much less neutral. So if it's something that's a pure free speech issue, we might. And the one thing that I would personally really like us to host, and we're probably going to do in the medium-term future, is something sort of like SourceForge for various offshore projects. Because we thought about doing GCSS, but that would really just be like a show-off. It wouldn't really be doing anything, because you don't really need an offshore server to host GCSS. It's small code. But a real offshore server for projects would be a real asset, and if we can figure out how to do that in a sustainable way, it's something that we just definitely want to do.
Any more questions? There's a question over there.
Okay, on the threats to what you do, we had the issue of pressure on the offshore government, and that the government is not really is able to sustain to keep against pressure from the outside. We had the issue of your connectivity, and but you also said that you are operating offices onshore, like in other countries.